of the National Park Service, I would like to welcome each of you to the Steamtown National Historic Site and our train we call the Scranton Limited. We'll be taking an abbreviated trip today. I know we were sold in the Gorge, but we're also going to find out about how a railroad yard operates and how it should operate. And today we've found that gap in operating as smoothly as possible. But please sit back and enjoy the ride, and part of our way of enjoying the ride is to stay safe. So I'm going to ask a favor of every one of you. Two favors, actually. First favor I'm going to ask is that you stay in the coach that you're riding in right now. And that means if any of you felt like riding on the roof, you are out of luck. That was yesterday's train. The second favor has to do with the windows. Some of your windows are open, some of them are shut. If you'd like to change that, that's fine by me. If you're seated at a window that is open, please do not stick out any hands, or heads, or arms, or legs, or cameras, or baby brothers outside the window. Because anything that sticks out the window might not return. And we want to return intact and ready to ride the 2:30 version of this train, the train as well. So anyway, right now we're waiting for the conductor to get aboard. The conductor is the most important person on the train because he tells the engineer, everybody's already here, and it's time for you to wake up and go to work. We might actually get the engineer to wake up for this trip. So anyway, we're going to be underway, and we'll hear the engineer blow the whistle to get us on the move. All right, well, that's the end of the trip. Everybody out. Well, what did you expect for 6 hours? Anyway, actually, we're stopping so we can have one of our train crew members, whoever drew the shortest straw, show us now how strong he is as he bends the iron. And what I mean by that is he walks up to one of the switch machines, and when he picks up the steel hammer and throws it to the other side, what he does is he closes off one set of tracks and opens up another set. We're going to be making a number of stops, and usually that's to go through the switches, and we might change direction, like we will be on this next move. Now, as we're traveling through the railroad yard, we'll find out a little bit about the beginnings of this railroad yard. This does date back in action to one degree or another since 1851. Before 1851, this was a rather unsuccessful meadow where sheep were grazed. For those of us wondering, what makes a sheep meadow unsuccessful? The answer is wolves. There's still plenty of wolves living in this part of Pennsylvania, but that would all change with the introduction of the railroad. They can't sell the wool that the sheep are producing because they keep disappearing on a daily basis. It means that the shepherd has to do something about the land, and he sold it to what would become known as the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western Railroad. When that railroad did not want to raise sheep, so they decided to build a railroad to open up this part of Pennsylvania to the outside world. The first day to buy the land, cut down the trees, blast their way through the stone and Carter Path through the mountains of Pennsylvania and the hills of New Jersey to eventually reach the New York Harbor. 3 years after they began this construction process, they opened up the rail line to New York. That sounds pretty amazing, but it was not actually kind of ordinary by the mid-1800s. One project after another was built through the country to connect one part of the nation with another. And sometimes they did decide that the best way to open up the territory and the trade routes was with a surface road called a turnpike. Sometimes they built a canal, a man-made river. But more often than not, they realized that the railroad might be the most successful way, and at least because of that, they did become one main successful way of getting goods moved around. But not all the railroads were successful. This one was an instant success. They decided to keep building upon their success by going further west out of this region. Their westward expansion took a little bit more than 3 years. But by May 15th of 1883, they ended their rail line construction when they reached the shores of Lake Erie in Buffalo, New York, which at that time created the shortest railroad route between the Atlantic Ocean and the Great Lakes, or the shortest route to the west, if you want to look at it that way. So that brought a lot of prosperity for the railroad because a lot of people were then in New York from various parts of Europe looking for a quick entrance into a new life in the new world. They weren't looking at exploring the new world, they wanted to settle in. So this was their first quick way into the country. Another thing happened to this railroad in the fact that they were able to be successful in hiring a lot of people, and a lot of jobs to be found in this part of Pennsylvania compared with many other parts of the world. This area is known for one main industry or product. Does anybody know what that product this area is famous for might be? Nope, the product is not paper. That came a little bit late. It is coal, but hard coal. As we're passing by engine number 47, you can see that there's a mountain coming away from us. Between those two mountains, the valley created by those mountains lies 75 to 80% of the world's supply of anthracite, or hard coal. If that number does not impress you, try finding coal on the other side of those same hills. It's just not there. The reason why anthracite is important is because it burns hotter and longer than soft coal and wood and paper, and also makes less smoke and less ash than those other products. So therefore, when people realized it was time to heat their homes and try to keep it clean, the fewer times you needed to dust off your piano, that became the better. So people demanded hard coal in their household, and that became the dominant product for this area. We're passing by a carload of anthracite right now. Now that carload has been full since 1999, and no customer has claimed it yet, so it tells you how important anthracite is these days. But at one time there were 10 railroads relying on that one product to stay in business. All 10 of those railroads had closed or merged or changed their business model simply because the demand for that hard coal doesn't exist the way it once was. On the running right-hand side, you see a string of cars that is pretty much popular now, as well as back then. You see a lot of grain cars passing by. That grain train is part of the reason why we cannot go to the main gorge this afternoon. I know that's what we told you at the ticket booth, that's where we're going, but because that train is blocking our access to the track that goes there, we're going to shorten our trip ever so slightly. And I saw a gentleman on the ground waving his hand. He's talking to the engineer, standing at one of the switches so he can open up the track, and we're going to head in the opposite direction. Toward those mountains, but not quite that far. If you're wondering where we are, this original railroad when we started in the 1850s was called the Delaware and Cobb's Gap Railroad. We're just west of the Cobb's Gap, which was a break in the mountain east of us. The Delaware River was the eastern end at that first junction when they first laid down the tracks. And we're 60 miles shy of the Delaware River. Because the strip being short, we're going to be much more shy. But don't worry, you won't notice the 59.5 miles we don't take on our way to the Delaware today. So anybody who came with the overnight tag, packed with maybe changes of underfoot for the rest of us who didn't come prepared, you see them in the luggage rack, you came overly prepared for today's journey. But the cars that are here, they're carrying grain. There's a grain mill in Pocono, Summit, Pennsylvania, which is about 28 miles away from us. And the grain company decided that was the only location that they could put their grain mill, because this train actually starts in Chicago. Cars are gathered from different parts of the country into Chicago when it becomes a train. That train comes into Pennsylvania and it ends here. It has 28 more miles to go. And then when it gets to the top of the Pocono Grade, that same mountain we can see out the window, then they can ship it by truck to various parts down into Philadelphia, Newark, down in New York City, and many other plants. They found that by shipping it downhill by truck, loaded, it saves money than by taking it by truck the entire way. And similarly, you think, well, if you can take it by truck downhill, they can take it by train downhill. But they found that actually starts costing them more money when they start the downward slide into one place or another. There's too many places where if you take the flour from the grain mill in Pocono Summit, that it would be less cost effective. You didn't expect to have a macro or microeconomics lesson in today's train when you bought your ticket, but there you go. One thing we're going to experience is a little bit of speed up on our train ride because our engineer needs to climb up a slight hill. This hill is not a natural feature of the area. And after they built the hill, they had to go one more. But when the railroad first started on the tracks, there wasn't much of a town here. 100 people lived in this area that would later become known as Scranton in 1840. But in 1840, two brothers from Oxford, New Jersey, moved into this region to start a small ironworks. It became very successful by the 1850, so they hired a lot of people. But it was a very difficult place to reach, but the population was still growing to about 2,000 people from 100 people 10 years earlier. When the rail line opened up to New York City in 1856, there was a population explosion because it's so much easier to gain access into this region to get a job in the ironworks and all the other things, to the point where people are now crowding each other out on the tracks that were laid at the same level of the city streets. So something had to be done, and therefore the railroad decided to elevate the tracks above the city streets on an earth and fill. And we're going to be traveling up a portion of that earth and fill on our journey today. Just to give you an idea, who does have to run through the city streets? The answer is on the running right-hand side. That is the trolley. If you take the trolley, one of the bad parts is you have to keep stopping for the roads you have to cross. But when you're on our train, you only have to stop to change direction. We're going to be above the road that they have to cross at street level. This elevation was built in 1866, and it made it easier for the railroad because not only were they not slowing down for as much street traffic, people weren't walking and bringing their horse-drawn wagons over the track, it also made a steadier climb into the mountains. Trains that don't have to slow down can move a lot faster or keep the momentum going. We start our tour off with a little bit of a safety message, and of course we want everybody to stay healthy. The railroads also have to institute a lot of safety rules and guidelines, and unfortunately one of the things that we have to realize is that sometimes the two tracks, the one that we're on and the one next to us, become one track. So we're going to go as far as we can to the switch where this train follows, the train next to us follows the switch, so we cannot get into that secondary, single track. The trains do like to stay out of the way of one another, because horrible things can happen. In fact, when the freight trains first started showing up in 1998, that was very new for us. And I was telling people, this might be an exciting day. We might actually get to run into a freight train. Then I'd see these looks of horror on people's faces, wondering why on earth would they have a problem with the freight train. It wasn't the freight train they had the problem with, it was the running into that they had the problem with. So we're staying clear of them, and this is as close as we can get to the freight. As long as they stay on their track and we stay on ours, we will be safe. Now we're waiting for clearance from the dispatcher to give us access back to the roundhouse area. The dispatcher also has to work with the freight train that needs to gain access to another railroad yard and get onto that railroad's main line. So therefore, everything kind of is at a standstill until the little snag clears up. Scranton is a city of railroads. I mentioned there were about 10 railroads that relied on the anthracite to stay in business. And all of them came pretty close, but 5 had tracks with direct access into the city of Scranton. The big railroad that came into town was called the Erie Railroad. The railroad ran from New York City to Chicago, Illinois. You think that would be a successful operation because they served the 2 biggest cities in the country at the time. But unfortunately, their main line seemed to avoid where the business was, well, the population centers were, and where the industrial centers were. So that meant that in order to feed their main line, they needed to rely on a network of branch lines to gain access to where the people were and where the goods were. And they actually knew that anthracite was so important that they acquired 3 different branch lines and access to the coal mines to feed their main line to both Chicago and New York. Their branch line comes meandering through the mountains, eventually stopping about 6 blocks away from us, and the passenger station still stands inside a restaurant about 4 or 5 blocks away from us. The second railroad into town after the Delaware Locomotive Western, this one ran from New York City to Buffalo, like I mentioned, but the third railroad to come into Scranton was called the Delaware and Hudson Railroad. Now, they did not serve big railroads at the end points. They went as far as south as Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and as far north as Rouse's Point, New York. So it means that you don't have to have the big cities along the main line or the end points, but they did have that one direct route from the southern railroads, being up in Wilkes-Barre, and going into the northern railroads, and eventually gaining access into Canada. So their main line goes underneath where our main line runs, and it meanders around the railroad yard, about 30 feet below it. The fourth railroad to come into the city of Scranton was the Central Railroad of New Jersey. They didn't want to be left out of the mix either, and they also shared some trackage with the Delaware and Hudson. So once they reached the point where they had to split off from the Delaware and Hudson line, they built a bridge going across the Lackawanna River and ending in downtown Scranton. The Delaware and Hudson and the Central New Jersey railroads had freight stations that are still standing. They also own passenger stations. They don't stand anymore. The Central New Jersey began its operations in Jersey City, New Jersey, and Scranton was so important that this became their end point. This was the main feeder of coal for their railroad operations. Keeping track, there are 4 railroads so far. Number 5 was the New York, Ontario, and Western Railroad. If you look at their main line, it comes nowhere near Scranton. They served Weehawken, New Jersey, in the New York Harbor area, going northbound into Oswego, New York, on Lake Ontario. That's where the name Ontario came into their name. Now, they were a railroad that seemed to avoid everything, population centers as well as industrial centers. A lot of cornfields, a lot of dairy farms, but not much else. But they did look at their fortunes and they decided to reach into the pocket and build a branch line in 1888 that would reach into Scranton. That branch line gave them their lifeline to stay in business until they went into bankruptcy in 1941. So 50 good years of life for that railroad. Unfortunately, they could not make it the 51st or 52nd year. So by 1957, the railroad was dissolved. After trying to reorganize it for several years in bankruptcy, they found that there's nothing that was going to keep that railroad afloat, so it was just liquidated. So there you have it, 5 railroads all here for the same purpose, to take the coal out of the ground and ship it outbound to other parts of the country, some parts of the world. And this probably has some connection to your household, even if your house is too new to burn hard coal in it. Maybe somebody in your family remembers burning the hard coal in the furnaces, or shoveling the ashes out of the bunker, taking them to the curb, and using that as the main way to stay warm in the wintertime and cook food in our stoves year round. This is your story as much as it is ours. In just a few seconds, you are going to hear the engineer blow the whistle. I'll let him blow the whistle first, and then tell you what he's trying to say with that whistle. That was 2 long blasts, a short one, and another long one. And that is the universal signal that we are crossing a road. If you're looking around, you don't see a road, you see a walkway. And sometimes our walkways, we encounter more people than we do when we have trains going outbound into the countryside, dealing with automobiles and people walking. So that is the same letter as the letter Q in Morse code. The telegraph was invented in the 1860s, but not really used by the railroads until 1844. Around that same time, when they established a simple language of dots and dashes called Morse code, then they were able to really take the technology to the next level and get messages not only quickly across the wires, but also clearly. The reason why we use the letter Q in traveling across the road is because the first ones to use the letter Q were the British. And around 1844, that's around the same time that Queen Victoria, a young woman, acquired the throne, becoming the first queen in quite a while. But also with that new technology, whenever she was coming through, they would blow the whistles on the boats and trains to let everybody know she's on her way and to clear the track, clear the waterways, clear whatever it is that Queen Victoria is coming through. Now, if there was a new king acquiring his way to the throne, they might have used the letter K, or they might have used his initial. But having a queen was still rather unusual, They had no idea she was going to stay at the throne for 60 years to take away from that unusual nature, but the letter Q still stands as the way to say, get out of the way, our train is coming through. And in this case, our train is the Queen. Okay, for those of us who do not recognize this little slice of heaven, this is where we made our first stop, when we left the roundhouse. So this is our last stop before returning to the roundhouse. And on behalf of our train crew, our engineer, our conductor, and myself, we'd like to thank you for riding with us. We hope you enjoyed this short trip through the history of this railroad yard, which is also one of your national parks. There are 427 national parks in the system, and hopefully you can visit a few more of them as your summer plans fall into place. As this trip is winding down, I do have a couple favors to ask of you. I know I've been nothing but asking favors of everybody. So these favors are going to be for your safety again. Please stay at your seat. Wait for our engineer to come bring our train to the final stop by the turntable. We'll know where we are at our last stop when we hear the whistle blow one time, and then we set the brake. I'm going to ask that we leave the coaches the same way we boarded at this end. And then, if you are interested, your ticket is also good for the 2:30 train. I make no guarantees on where we're going with that one. It's still scheduled to go to Maine Park, but I don't want to make a guarantee and only find out that we're going in the same shortened journey yet again. But if you are coming to the stop, please check around your seat. Make sure you have everything and everyone with you that you brought on board the train. Take them off the train. If you thought this was your chance to change up to better family members by swapping with people on the train, please take care of that in the parking lot and not on board my train. All right? Otherwise, thanks again for riding with us. Have a great day and have a safe journey home. Bye.
Remember 611 when it did this, Dad? Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
What are they doing?
Shoveling colon, maybe? Yeah, so I'm...
Probably the best Steamtown trip I ever had.